I don't want charity. The young man stood outside the widow's ranch house, hat in his hands, his coat torn by weeks on the road. Just give my little sisters a bottle of milk each day. He glanced toward the two frightened girls standing beside him. I'll fix everything that's broken on your ranch. The widow looked at the children, then at the broken fences stretching across hundreds of acres. Finally, she smiled sadly. You've offered more than every man I've hired this year. She opened the gate. Come inside. Neither of them realized that before winter ended, the ranch would survive only because that homeless stranger had refused to ask for anything more than milk. Daniel Carter was 20 when he lost his home. His father had managed one of the largest cattle ranches in the county. His mother taught at the little schoolhouse nearby. When influenza claimed them both within a single winter, creditors arrived before spring. Every debt was collected, every possession sold. The ranch disappeared piece by piece. Only Daniel and his two younger sisters remained. 9-year-old Lily, 7-year-old Rose. For months Daniel searched for work. Every ranch already had enough hands. Every farm struggled after a poor harvest. Some employers refused because feeding 3 people cost too much. Others offered work, but no shelter. By late autumn, they had only enough money for 2 days of food. The first snowfall arrived unusually early. Rose quietly whispered one evening, "I'm hungry." Daniel looked away. There was nothing left to give. The following morning they reached Harper Ranch. The place had once been famous. Hundreds of cattle, healthy horses, strong fences, good pasture. Now everything looked different. Broken gates leaned sideways. Barn roofs sagged. Water troughs overflowed where cracked pipes leaked. Several windbreak fences had collapsed completely. Standing alone in the yard was the owner, widow Margaret Harper, 32 years old. Her husband had died beneath an overturned hay wagon the previous winter. Since then, workers had gradually left. The ranch had become too much for one person. Daniel removed his hat. "I don't need wages." Margaret looked surprised. "I only need milk." She frowned gently. "Milk?" He nodded toward the girls. "They haven't had any for nearly a week." Silence lingered. "I can repair fences." He pointed toward the sagging barn. "I can fix roofs." Then toward the leaking trough. "I understand pumps." Finally, he looked directly at her. "Feed my sisters. I'll earn every drop." Margaret studied him for several long seconds. His worn gloves. His patched boots. The two little girls trying not to appear frightened. Then she quietly opened the gate. "You start after breakfast." Daniel smiled for the first time in weeks. The girls each received a warm cup of milk before sunrise. To them it tasted like a feast. Daniel immediately went to work. He never waited for instructions. He repaired loose corral rails, straightened leaning fence posts, replaced broken gate hinges, sharpened worn tools, cleaned clogged drainage ditches around the barn. Tom Grady stopped by 2 days later delivering supplies. He watched Daniel rebuilding an old loading chute. New ranch hand. Margaret smiled. "He says he's only working for milk." Tom looked surprised. "Only milk. He insists." Tom watched Daniel carefully fitting heavy oak beams together. "He works like he owns the place." Margaret quietly answered, "No, he works like he's afraid to lose it." Every evening Daniel taught Lily and Rose beside the kitchen table after chores. Margaret noticed immediately. "They still study." Daniel nodded. "Our mother would have wanted that." Margaret smiled. "So would my husband." The little family slowly settled into ranch life. Weeks passed. Daniel repaired the windmill that pumped water into the livestock tanks. He rebuilt several cattle pens using timber from collapsed sheds. Even the horses seemed calmer after he adjusted loose stall doors and repaired uneven flooring. One afternoon, Margaret found him studying the hills instead of working. "What are you looking at?" Daniel pointed toward the western ridges. "The snow." She frowned. "It's still October." "I know." He remained silent for another moment. "The drifts are forming lower than they should." Margaret looked again. She couldn't see anything unusual. "My father always watched the mountains." Daniel continued quietly. "The first snow tells you how the rest of winter wants to behave." Margaret smiled politely. "I hope it's wrong." "So do I." The following morning Daniel inspected every hay barn. Several roofs leaked slightly. Normally nobody would worry until spring. Daniel immediately climbed onto each roof, replacing damaged shingles, strengthening rafters, clearing weak supports. Workers passing the ranch laughed. "Preparing for a blizzard already?" "It's October." Daniel ignored every comment. Instead, he inspected every water line. The shallow pipes supplying the livestock troughs worried him. They would freeze first. Using leftover timber and straw, he built insulated wooden covers over every exposed valve and pump. He dug several sections of pipe deeper where the soil allowed. Margaret watched from the porch. Necessary, Daniel nodded. If winter comes early. She looked toward the clear blue sky. It feels impossible. He smiled gently. I hope we're wasting our time. The next project confused everyone. Daniel converted an old equipment shed into a feed storage building. Instead of stacking hay outdoors beneath tarps like neighboring ranches, he insisted on moving nearly every bale inside. Tom stopped by again. You're making twice the work. Daniel continued lifting another bale. Maybe. Tom looked around. Why move everything now? Daniel answered without slowing down. Snow doesn't ask permission. Margaret gradually stopped questioning him. Every improvement made sense, even if it seemed early. New windbreak fences rose beside the north pasture. Extra firewood filled the woodshed. Harnesses were repaired. Lanterns cleaned. Emergency grain stored. The ranch looked more prepared every day. Then the weather rider arrived. No one liked seeing weather riders before winter, especially anxious ones. The entire settlement gathered outside the trading post. The rider climbed from his exhausted horse. Fresh snow covered both saddle and coat, though autumn had barely ended. The northern pass closed this morning. Silence spread. Already. Someone whispered. The rider nodded grimly. The earliest closure in years. Nobody spoke. Then came the warning. A severe winter front crossed the mountains 2 weeks ahead of schedule. He slowly looked across the crowd. If your ranch isn't ready by tomorrow. He paused. It won't be ready at all. That evening, Margaret walked through her ranch as the sun disappeared behind dark clouds. Every fence stood repaired. Every hay bale rested safely indoors. The pumps were insulated. Firewood stacked high. The livestock sheltered. Daniel quietly checked the final barn door before leading Lily and Rose toward the house. Margaret looked toward the mountains where thick gray clouds swallowed the last light. You knew? Daniel shook his head gently. I only listened. The first icy wind swept across the ranch. By dawn, winter would arrive weeks before anyone expected. The storm struck before sunrise. Not with gentle snowfall. With a wall of wind that drove ice across the prairie like handfuls of broken glass. By noon, every fence line had vanished. By evening, drifts stood taller than the corral gates. Winter had arrived nearly a month early. Daniel Carter pulled on his heavy coat before daylight. Margaret met him on the porch. You don't have to go out. He looked toward the barn. The cattle do. The insulated pump boxes he had built weeks earlier made the difference immediately. While neighboring ranches struggled to thaw frozen valves with boiling water, Harper Ranch's pumps still worked. Fresh water flowed into the livestock troughs. Not quickly, but steadily. Tom Grady rode in through waist-deep snow. His horse trembled from exhaustion. Our north pump froze solid. Daniel nodded. Bring your cattle here. Tom stared. You've got enough water? Daniel smiled. We planned for more than ourselves. By the second day, neighboring ranches faced another problem. Hay stacked beneath tarps had frozen into heavy blocks beneath wind-driven snow. Men hacked at frozen bales with axes. Many lost half their feed trying to separate it. Inside Harper Ranch's storage shed, every bale remained dry. Daniel had insisted they move everything indoors weeks before the storm. Now Margaret understood why. She quietly looked at him. I thought you were making extra work. Daniel smiled. I was trying to save it. Soon wagons began arriving. A family whose horses had gone without water. An elderly rancher whose barn roof had collapsed. A young couple carrying 2 freezing calves wrapped in blankets. Margaret never turned anyone away. Daniel immediately organized the work. Healthy cattle moved into unused corrals. Extra hay was measured carefully. Every visitor helped prepare something before leaving. No one accepted charity. Everyone contributed. The ranch slowly became the center of the valley's survival. On the 4th day, Jacob Miller arrived. The old ranch builder spent an hour walking the property despite the snow. He studied every repaired gate, the reinforced barn roofs, the insulated water lines, the indoor hay storage. Finally, he stopped beside Daniel. You know what everyone misunderstood. Daniel waited. They thought preparation was expensive. Jacob pointed toward the standing barns. It wasn't. He pointed toward the frozen valley. Waiting was. Tom laughed quietly. We all planned for an ordinary winter. Jacob nodded. He planned for the worst one. Outside, the blizzard refused to end. Day 5, Day 6, Day 7. Several ranches lost entire sections of fencing. Cattle wandered into deep drifts. Frozen water troughs became useless. Feed spoiled beneath collapsed sheds. Harper Ranch remained busy from dawn until dark. Daniel repaired broken harnesses, strengthened weakened barn doors, built temporary sled runners for hauling hay through the snow. Every evening, he checked every animal himself before sleeping, usually long after everyone else. One night, Margaret found him in the barn covering a newborn calf with dry blankets. "You've been awake since yesterday." He shrugged. "They can't wait until morning." She smiled softly. "Neither do you." On the 8th day, the weather rider finally reached the ranch. Snow covered both horse and rider. He slowly climbed down and looked around in disbelief. Healthy cattle, working pumps, dry hay, strong fences, smoke rising steadily from every chimney. Families working together. "I've crossed 6 ranches." Nobody interrupted. "I've seen frozen herds. I've seen empty barns. I've seen men abandoning livestock because they couldn't reach feed." He looked toward Daniel. "They told me a homeless young man worked here for milk." His eyes swept across the ranch. They forgot to mention he saved the largest ranch in the valley. 3 days later, the storm finally passed. Sunlight returned. Snow sparkled across the prairie. Families slowly dug their homes free. Many ranches had survived only because Harper Ranch had shared feed, water, and tools throughout the blizzard. Spring arrived with green grass and healthy calves. The ranch recovered faster than anyone expected. Word spread far beyond the valley. Not about the storm, about the young ranch hand who had seen winter coming before anyone else. One afternoon, Margaret found Daniel repairing the last broken section of fence. Lily and Rose chased newborn calves across the pasture, laughing louder than they had in months. "You asked me for milk." Daniel smiled. "They needed it." Margaret looked across the thriving ranch. "I think you've earned far more." She handed him a folded document. It transferred a partnership in the ranch. Not as an employee, as an equal owner. Daniel looked at the paper for a long moment. "I only came here hoping my sisters wouldn't go hungry." Margaret smiled. "And instead you gave all of us a future." Years later, travelers passing Harper Ranch often admired its sturdy barns, protected water lines, and carefully designed winter storage. Many copied its methods. Some believed the ranch survived because it had more land. Others believed it had stronger buildings. Neither was true. The ranch survived because one homeless young man refused to wait for trouble before preparing for it. He had asked only for enough milk to keep 2 little girls healthy. In return, he gave an entire valley something far more valuable. Hope that was built before the storm, not after it.